Ever lie awake at 3 in the morning with the house settled so quiet you can hear your own blood moving, and suddenly a voice you haven't heard in years whispers your name through the wall like it never left, like the past had never fully settled and decided it wasn't finished with you yet? My name is Ellen Marie Carter. I'm 82 years old. I've outlived my husband, my only brother, and every single person who knew the whole truth about what happened on Cedar Lane in Elmira, New York, except one. And for 42 years, I've carried the sound of Harold Whitaker calling for help at 3:03 a.m., when the coroner firmly insisted that Harold had been unresponsive since 8:15 the night before. So tell me, when someone you thought was gone forever knows your darkest secret and starts knocking on the wall you share, do you answer? Or do you do what I did and pretend you're still asleep? It was a Tuesday in October, 1983, the kind of damp, leaf-rotting evening where the porch lights look sickly yellow and nobody walks the sidewalks after supper. Harold hadn't come out to get his newspaper that morning, which wasn't like him. He was a creature of habit. Same flannel shirt, same cup of Folgers at 6:30 sharp. I'd made chicken and dumplings because my mother raised me to feed people who are hurting even when they won't admit it, and Harold had been hurting since Ruth's illness took her 4 years earlier. I knocked, no answer. Used the spare key he'd pressed into my hand back in '77 with the words, "just in case." The living room smelled like old coffee and Bengay. There he was, tilted sideways in that brown vinyl recliner, television flickering, some game show nobody was watching, sitting strangely still, eyes unfocused, like he had drifted far away. I touched his neck. No response. Touched his wrist. No movement. I gently lowered his eyelids the way I'd seen done in movies and dialed the coroner from the rotary phone on the wall. Doc Brennan and his boys came, asked the usual questions, wrote 8:15 on the certificate, secured the bag, and that was supposed to be the end of Harold Whitaker. I locked his door behind me, walked the 12 steps back to my own house, poured a finger of Seagram's I didn't even taste, and tried to convince myself the worst part of my day was over. It wasn't. At 3:03 a.m., the first thud hit the wall we shared. 3 slow, deliberate knocks that rattled the picture of my late husband right off its nail. Then the voice, strained and rough, unmistakable. Ellen, please, I need help. Open the door." I shot upright so fast the room spun. My bedroom shared that exact wall with Harold's bedroom. I knew because we joked about hearing each other snore after Ruth passed. I sat frozen, clutching the chenille bedspread to my throat like a schoolgirl, telling myself it was the house settling, telling myself it was wind, telling myself anything except the truth my body already knew. The knocking stopped as suddenly as it started. I didn't sleep again for the rest of the night, and I blamed myself for every second I stayed silent. The second night, I waited for it. I left the lights off, sat in the dark with a cup of tea gone cold, and right on schedule, 3:03 a.m., the knocks came again. Harder this time, like fists that still had something to prove. Then the voice, clearer, almost conversational. "Ellen, you promised me in '77. You swore on your own mother's name you'd tell her if anything happened." My stomach dropped so fast I thought I'd be sick on the hooked rug my grandmother made. There was only one promise I ever made Harold Whitaker in 1977, and it was the kind you bury so deep you start believing the dirt will keep it quiet forever.
Someone she shouldn't have trusted. The situation would have caused serious trouble for both families. Harold came to me because I'd lost a baby myself the year before, and he knew I understood silence. I drove Claire 3 towns over to a women's support center that helped young women through difficult situations privately, held her hand while she cried softly while I stayed beside her, and when things were settled, we put the little bracelet and the grainy picture in a Maxwell House tin and hid it under the old oak in Harold's backyard at midnight. Claire left for California the next morning with $200 and instructions never to come back. Harold and I shook hands like we'd just finished planting tulip bulbs instead of a secret that would outlive us both. So when that voice on the second night said, "Tell her I waited," I knew exactly who her was, and I knew the past under that oak tree was no longer resting quietly. By the end of the week, I was a wreck, bags under my eyes, jumping at every creak. The ladies at the beauty parlor started whispering that poor Ellen was losing it after finding Harold. Doc Brennan stopped by with a bottle of little yellow pills and that patient smile men give women they think are fragile. His daughter Marlene, my best friend since we were 6, patted my hand and said, "Grief plays tricks, honey. You'll feel better soon." But Marlene's hand was shaking too, and she wouldn't look me in the eye. And I knew right then the tricks had only just started. 10 days after the funeral, I couldn't stand my own house anymore. I waited until the moon was high, slipped on my robe and house shoes, took Harold's spare key, and let myself into his place. The silence was heavier than any noise I'd ever heard. I went straight to his bedroom because that's where the voice always seemed to come from. The bed was still unmade, indentation in the pillow where his head had been. I opened the bottom dresser drawer, felt around, and my fingers brushed a strip of tape. 6 Polaroids stuck to the underside. Me and Harold and Claire the night we dug the hole, smiling like we were at a picnic, and one extra shot none of us remembered taking. A blurry figure standing behind the oak tree watching us, face obscured. On the back of the last picture, Harold had written in his spidery hand, "If anything happens to me, Ellen keeps these. She knows why." I was still holding the pictures when the air chilled so quickly the mirror clouded. The rocking chair in the corner, Ruth's chair, started moving. Slow creaks like someone had just sat down. Then the voice, close enough to feel. "Ellen, it's time. Tell her I waited." I spun around, nothing. Just the chair rocking faster and the bedroom door easing shut all by itself. I slept with the lights on for the next 36 years. In 2019, Marlene showed up on my porch with a face 10 years older than the calendar said she should have. She poured us each a bourbon, hands trembling, and slid a yellowed coroner's worksheet across my kitchen table. The original time wasn't 8:15 p.m., it was 2:47 a.m. Doc Brennan thought my panic that night might draw unwanted attention, so he adjusted the certificate 6 hours. Harold had actually passed while I sat home convincing myself everything was fine. Meaning, the voice that first night was still Harold, scared, calling out, and I didn't reach him in time because I was too afraid to open a door. I started checking his bedroom window every night at 3, even after both houses went empty in 2001. Some nights the curtain moves just enough to make my heart stop. Then, last month, my landline rang at 3:12 a.m. Yes, I still have a landline. Some things you don't let go of. I picked up and heard only static, and that same gravel voice, "Ellen," the box under the floorboards.
Now, she's coming home. Caller ID read Whitaker, H. A number disconnected since Reagan was president. Last week, I finally did what I swore I'd never do. I took a crowbar and a flashlight to Harold's old living room at 2:30 a.m., pried up the oak boards by the fireplace, and there it was, a rusted cash box. Inside, the original Polaroids, Harold's pocket watch stopped at 2:47, and a letter to Claire that began, "If you're reading this, I waited those long hours hoping Ellen would return, but she never knew I needed her." He wrote that he sat in that recliner, holding the phone, too weak to dial, hoping I'd check on him one more time, because he couldn't find closure carrying what we hid. 3 nights ago, an envelope slid through my mail slot. No stamp, no address. Inside was Harold's watch, now ticking again, and a new photograph. Claire, gray-haired, standing under the oak tree last month, staring straight up at Harold's old bedroom window like she was waiting for someone to wave. On the back, in handwriting I didn't recognize, "Daddy, tell her I waited too." So tonight, I'm sitting here, at 82, with a watch ticking louder than my own heart, wondering if I burn every last piece of this story, I finally give them both peace, or if I pick up the phone, call the California number I looked up this morning, and finish the promise I broke 42 years ago when I pulled the covers over my head and couldn't bring myself to check on my neighbor one last time. If your phone rang right now, and the voice on the other end was someone you thought you'd said goodbye to decades ago, asking you to finally tell the truth you swore you'd keep buried forever, would you answer? Or would you do what I've done every night since 1983? Sit perfectly still in the dark and hope the ringing stops before you have to decide. Drop your own 3 a.m. story in the comments. Some secrets only feel lighter when you realize you're not the only one still awake carrying them. If this story stayed with you in any way, feel free to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. I share these stories because someone out there has lived a version of them, and maybe hearing it helps a little. Thanks for being here, and take care of yourself tonight.